Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, with our ongoing series on Indian writing in English, we have been conducting numerous sessions and we believe that all these sessions were very beneficial for you. So taking the series forward, today we would be talking on Macaulay's Minute. We had a discussion on Macaulay's Minute in our previous sessions also. So this is the second lecture on Macaulay's Minute and we would be talking on imagined perspective today. That is Macaulay's Minute. Imagined perspective is today's topic of discussion, and for this very discussion we have once again with us in our studios Professor Anand Prakash. Professor Anand Prakash is a renowned academician, and as we all know, your constant feedbacks for his lectures give us an idea that how much you appreciate his lectures. Dr. Anand Prakash is a retired professor from Delhi University, and his immense experience would definitely give us a new philosophy, a new insight. Hello sir, welcome to the EduSet lecture.
Thank you, Geetika, and welcome viewers. And today we have the second discussion on Macaulay's Minute. In the first discussion, we shared some information. I referred to the background to what happened in the case of Macaulay's Minute, how he composed it, what areas he had in mind, what arguments he wanted to project. All this was covered broadly in the previous discussion. In the second discussion, I would like to take myself out of the effect of Macaulay's Minute and the argument, and I would like to look at it from a distance. Well, the distances are of two kinds. One distance is in the 19th century, when the perspective of India was under attack by a foreign power. And the second idea, the second perspective is of India today, India in the 21st century, when India has been free from the foreign yoke for a good number of years, for close to 7 decades. So much water has flown down the Yamuna in the last so many years, and we can have an objective look on what Macaulay meant, what he imagined as the perspective that in his opinion would be useful for India. But as I pointed out, the perspective was the British perspective. The perspective was of the money, the investment that was being made by the British power in order to do something here, to achieve an aim, a well-defined aim. And the writer Macaulay, who wrote to the British Parliament, talking about India and suggesting a way out of the problems that India faced under the British yoke, that problem also is there, quite clearly entrenched in the words that he spoke, in the words that he wrote, in the words that he used in order to make clear his intent. So today's perspective gives us the hindsight. Today we can look back and we can comment on things because we know the outcome of Macaulay's vision that was articulated by him in the 19th century. So today the outcome is there, so we can place this minute, this document under the perspective of what actually happened in India. So which means that I am saying there is a gap always between what is intended and what is achieved. The person who starts the debate at a particular time regarding the future, this person doesn't know as to what's going to happen. This person only lays down a plan before the rest of the people. But then when much time is spent and people contend with the argument that the person initially presented, that is taken care of by those who actually implement it and see the consequences of that. So Macaulay, who presented his minute in 1835, was looking into the future. We who are today in the 21st century, we are looking back at what Macaulay said and what actually happened in the process of implementing that document as a policy document. So please keep this thing in mind, and then perhaps we can have a proper view of Macaulay from our angle today, from the angle of people who are independent, the people who have their fate in their hands, who will decide things on their own, who will consult one another, who will go into the intricacies of the argument and then adopt a particular plan and then that plan will always be under some kind of a surveillance by the rest of the citizens for whom the plan is made. So we have this advantage of hindsight, and I'm sure that today we can think of Macaulay's minute in a manner that could not have been possible when Macaulay himself presented the minute. So with this brief introduction, let's go into the implications of what he is saying. I'm not today much worried about the information that we already have. There is an argument that he has given, and in fact I went into some areas which made me understand at that time as to what the intention was meant to be. But then when we totally move out of the document and we totally move out of the 19th century, then we can have a slightly different view. That is why the subtitle given to the topic today is Imagined Perspectives. We couldn't have just thought about the imagined perspective at that time, because then we were in the thick of it. Today we can say this is what he imagined. This was the perspective according to him, and this is what happened. And since what happened may have gone at variance with what he intended, therefore we can say, okay, this was imagined perspective, and there was a difference between what he said and what finally came out of it. So it is necessary to explain the implication of imagined. Imagined, which might have failed, which might have incompletely or partially successful, or which completely failed. So these three options are there today with us, and we can definitely pass a kind of judgment on what Macaulay said at that time. So the first point in this connection that I would like to make is that we discussed 19th century when Macaulay was active. We discussed this century as some kind of a development that will help us understand our time today. That's why we go back. So if we look at the 19th century, then we in fact are having a look at ourselves, our own behavior. In that sense, studying 19th century is an act of education for us. We should educate ourselves in the clashes that occurred in the country at the economic, political, cultural level in the 19th century, and those clashes have lessons to teach to us. If we go into those lessons, then we realize that these are the mistakes that were committed. This was what the plan of the oppressor was, and maybe we fell into the logic of that plan, and we somehow after adopting the plan, we went the wrong way. We were not true to our salt with respect to our own specific interests. So imagined perspectives gives us that chance, and I say that the 19th century is a great educator. What we are today is the outcome of what was decided for our country in the 19th century. If people aimed at something, creating, constructing a community of people who Macaulay said in his minute, who would be supporting them with the Britishers, and they will talk in English, and they will think in English, and they will feel in English, and they will have their value system there. This is what he imagined. Has it actually happened? So we can ask that question today, because we have the advantage of knowing what went on after the minute was presented. So it's a great educator, and I'm sure that if we do not know about the 19th century, if we do not know about the interests of the Britishers who were ruling us in the 19th century, technically after 1857, but otherwise all across the century. And if we don't know what they intended and what we went through, then of course we can't really correct our way today. So I call it an act of education, and I'm sure that when I discuss this, then I'll be the wiser after the lecture is over, because I will be saying things which reflect on our interests then and now. So it's an educator in that sense of the term. Now there are two words that I like to use specifically here. There's a word called viewing. Viewing means seeing, using one's eye in order to spot the image in front of me in clear terms. There is another word called envisioning. I have a vision. I have some kind of a plan, some kind of a spread out net, a net of thought, and I'm in a way projecting myself into the future. That is supposed to be the vision. So what is Macaulay's view and what is his vision? what he's viewing and what he's envisioning, both of them have to be kept in mind today. And we can do that. Language helps us there. Macaulay, when he wrote it, then he was just articulating his view in the immediate context. But those words that he's used in order to articulate his intent, those words might take us in a different direction also. If words are not easy to handle. You think that your idea is clear, but somebody else in the same situation, in the same context, will say something else, even though the idea is the same. So words, betray. Words reveal the intentions of the speaker quite clearly, and maybe the intention was not, in accordance with what Macaulay would have said. So we'll go into this in this language aspect also when we discuss, because then we can clearly find out, the implications of what he had said, and maybe he told himself, maybe he said to himself, maybe he wanted others to pay compliment to him for his objectivity. But we should find out on our own by thinking of the words that he is using, whether he was actually objective, or he had certain prejudices. Whether he was of the devil's or the angel's party, I don't go into that. But was he saying exactly what he said? What was he meaning? Was that his idea, that this is what he wanted to say, or was he being less truthful than he thought he was? So these are the questions, when you go into the language used by Macaulay in the minute. So he says something, he envisions something. Saying is in the immediate context, envisioning is in the context of 10 years, 20 years, 30 years later. Because when you draw up a plan, then you have a vision, and that vision that you have in your mind is enshrined in your words. But then that vision unfolds in a slightly different manner later. In that case, what happens? So this is our job as teachers, this is our job as thinkers and readers, to find out whether he envisioned this, whether he said it, and if there was a difference between the two, then wherein lay the difference. I straight away start with the statement that the view of Macaulay has three specific areas to consider. First, he wants to use us through the British regime. He's a spokesperson of the British regime. He is saying things in a manner that the British regime can use us for their own interests, and that the use of Indians, the use of Indian resources, the use of Indian people, the use of India's and Indians' energy, that seems to be the motive of the British regime in the 19th century. They want to use us. And if somebody wants to use us, then that person is insulting us. Then that person is not taking us as equals. Then that person is not taking us as participants in a common kind of action. Because this person has his eye on our abilities, which he can use for his interests. So use is important, and I say, with some amount of conviction, that this use is entrenched in the very words that he is using in this document. So he is using us. The British regime is going to use us. The British regime is going to use our resources. The second word that I would say would be manipulate. That they have studied our behavior, that they have gone into the facts of the case, they have gone around collecting data, and then they call some very intelligent people from back home, and these people first discuss they also discuss the possibilities in India. Then they discuss the potentiality of resistance in India at that time. Then they take measures. So all this is there geared towards what can be called manipulation. So you are not in a way paying any respect to the person with whom you are interacting. You are trying to manipulate that person in a manner that person can be kept on tenterhooks, and then that person can be taken advantage of. So you take an advantage of a person, which means you are insulting that person. So they had this aim at that time to manipulate India and Indians. And the third word that I use is oppress. They wanted to oppress us. And oppression has once again a very, very tricky connotation. Oppression means that if we are left alone, then we will take an independent stand. So their job is first to oppress, first to press us hard, to compel us to obey their dictum. So which means that there are two things in oppression. that they want to serve their own interests by oppressing us, or by telling us to go against our wishes. And secondly, they also know that unless they oppress, they will not get their gain, which means that they know that potentially we can be equal to them. And human beings are potentially equal all over the world. I am not saying that we are superior to others, but definitely I have a right to say that I am equal to others. And if somebody else doesn't consider me as an equal, then of course I feel insulted. And in India in the 19th century, the policies that they were drawing up, they were actually insulting the whole nation. This nation, which at that time may not have been a nation in the sense we understand the term today, but then definitely it was a geographically bound country. It had its own resources, it had its own people. Those people had a specific pattern of life, and once they studied us, then they could circumvent our interests, and they could then reach their own aim that they had set forth in life. So these are 3 words, and please keep them in mind, because if they are using us, if they are manipulating us, if they are oppressing us, then this is what the document is going to tell us. If we do not recognize this, then maybe we can take this document as one which is written in good English, that is argued very closely, and that is a rational document, and because it's a rational document, so therefore we should appreciate it. We can say that also. But then for my purpose to analyze this particular document, please keep these 3 words in mind. They have their own interest to use us, to manipulate us, and to oppress us. So with these words, you look at the document, and then certain meaning will come out of it. The point that I would then make is, they are thinking of investing resources here. They want to spend money. They want to give money to certain sections in society, and for a particular purpose. And what is the purpose? Now read the line, read the particular phrase that Macaulay has used in the document. He says they are using their resources in order to, and I quote, promote learning in India. What learning that is, that he will tell later, but then learning is a very noble activity. If somebody makes us learn, if somebody helps us learn, if we get that kind of assistance from these people to learn, then it's a good thing. But then it depends on what he calls learning. But then he's promoting learning with the money that he has, with the money that the British government spares for us, learning in India. So learning is knowledge. Learning is a kind of enlightened activity. Well, I don't know and I'm ignorant, and then somebody comes and explains to me things, and then I say, okay, that's what's the meaning of life here in India. That's how resources have to be spent. So I start thinking about these things, and that is what learning is. But the person who is teaching us, that person may have other motives behind his or her act. And if that act is not gone into, if that motive is not gone into, then learning either is not learning or it's a dubious kind of learning. So this is what we have to accept. But see the words he is using. The cause is noble. The cause is fine. When they go back home and they talk to their own people in their own country, England, that they went to India in order to spread learning here, then the good people there, the good souls in England, they would say, okay, you are doing a nice job. After all, if they don't have learning at that point of time, then you should go and spread learning. But did they come to help us learn? Once again, go back to those 3 words, and you find they did not come here to learn, to spread the message of learning, and they didn't want to make us learned people. What they wanted was to invest their money so that they could get profit out of it. Profit can be of different kinds, but profit finally, and that then it was not learning, then it was a profit seeking activity. Learning was only a word to couch the profit seeking activity in a good phrase, so that people all over would understand that they are doing a noble thing. So they are promoting learning here, and they will invest money for that. This is the first pointer, that causes some discomfort to me. That they came here to promote learning, and what kind of a learning, that they won't explain very clearly. Therefore, they are putting money here, and because they put their money here, therefore their interests become much more dynamic, much more concrete than would be the case if they came here to spread their message as propagators of certain ideas. After all, if somebody is called to England to give a lecture, if we call somebody from England to come here and give a lecture to us, then that's one kind of thing. But if somebody is investing money here and then says, I'm investing money in institutions, therefore, so that finally learning will emerge from the institutions, then one has to be very careful regarding the curriculum that they would give us for pursuing, the teachers that they would appoint, the other facilities that they would give, the curriculum consisting of certain texts that will be decided. That also is to be kept in mind. So when the whole thing is examined from the perspective of objective understanding, then of course a different kind of conclusion might emerge. So the first thing is that they have come here to promote learning, and this phrase makes me conscious about as to what learning is, and see the implication of promoting learning, which means learning is not promoted in India in the 19th century. Maybe factually that's the case. I'm not saying about the 19th century that all activity going on here on our own was a good activity or a bad activity. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that here the implication is that somebody is talking from a superior position, a position of superiority, and therefore people who are not learned, they are given learning. So now see, language is not all that simple that they came here to spread learning. They also assumed that there was no learning here or there was less learning here. Whether actually that is the case is a different matter. They came with the purpose that they will spread learning here, what they considered learning and what India did not possess at the time. So this is prejudice, and this assumption also is there in the case of such a phrase that he is using in his text. The second thing that I say about this document is also with respect to the words that he is using. For instance, see the words that he is using. He says he is supposed to attack and at least critique, reject, that is. He is supposed to reject critically. And then I quote the words, false texts and false philosophy. So India possesses false facts, false texts. Which are the texts he has in mind? Maybe Sanskrit texts, maybe Arabic texts. He is also commenting on the quality of all those texts, and he is calling them false. So if he right in the beginning names them that they are false, then of course he has to be bound by the argument of falsity. So because he has called them false, the texts are false, therefore he will later on explain as to how they are false. But are they false? Are texts that were composed centuries ago, they were false texts? It can have lots of things too. For instance, the texts were not properly preserved in India. What was written, let's say, in the 10th century or in the 5th century, and that is there in Sanskrit, that's a false text. What does it mean? Two things specifically. One, that the text has not been preserved properly, and some other things have been mixed with it, and therefore the text that was there 1,000 years ago or more than that, that text has not been preserved in the same form, therefore it's a false text. Okay? It's a matter of scholarship. Somebody can really study the text, go into the history of preserving the text, can have other areas to consult, and then finally say, okay, this is not how the text was at that time, but then finally it became this. And the second thing, that is the false philosophy. False text, false philosophy. Now false philosophy is a broader term, and I think when we go into the implications of these words, then we understand that this person has a kind of bias, and this bias is reflected all over the text that we can really consider. So here I stop to tell you, friends, that the words really betray certain intentions which otherwise remain hidden, and unless we are alert about the implications of the phrases that are used, we really cannot understand the nature of the text. Thank you.
Ended approximately at
Now, friends, that we are talking about Macaulay's Minute, a document that he composed about India's interests from the point of view of the Britishers. Therefore, we should go apart from language, the words that he is using, into the ideas that he is presenting. So, words and then ideas. Words, bring out the unconscious meaning of the person, and ideas are there directly communicated through words. So, now let us shift from the discussion of language, the specific words that he is using, to the ideas that he is conveying. And what picture emerges in the context of the ideas that he is presenting to us. I just take 2 or 3 instances for this. One instance is about social engineering. What does it mean, the term social engineering? Engineering happens generally in the technical area, technological area, in a factory. But engineering also can happen in society, and it's a very dangerous term, because the person who is doing engineering in society, this person may have motives that are not good for the sustenance of society. We are not supposed to be engineered. The society is not supposed to be engineered. But these people, the Britishers who came from outside to take advantage of our resources and then became our masters, these people started creating things in the country which were not there earlier. Maybe I don't go into the fallout. Fallout may be positive or good, but then their motive was to, what I use the word, social engineering. What did they mean by this? Well, he says very clearly that we have to create in India a class which I call the middle class today. Middle class is all right if it emerges, in the natural process. If people are organizing their economic planning and other economic activity in a specific manner, then it's their job to do so. Productivity is to be increased with the help of planning. But then, if a social group is constructed, is created in the country under the planning of certain forces in India, then it's a different thing. And they are thinking of creating a group of people in India who will be supporting them, and they would call them the middle class. The word term middle class may not be there at that time very popular, but then what it means is that there is a specific group in India which will be Indians, which will be constituting Indians, but then there will be different kind of Indians. So he wants to split India into 2 segments. One segment which is the original India, and the second segment which is the India that is which supports the cause of the British. He is saying very clearly, unabashedly in this document, that he will think of creating, he will recommend that this be created in India, a group of people. He says he will form a class is a group, who may be interpreters. If they appoint a few interpreters, people who understand the 2 languages, the Indian language and English, and then the person understands English and conveys to the Indians in their language, and vice versa. That is called an interpreter. 2 people who can't understand each other's language directly, they ask an interpreter to help them, and the interpreter hears the view of one person and interprets it and translates it into the language of the other person, and the process goes on. This is what interpreter is. So he will have a group of interpreters, a whole class of interpreters. A class means what? Thousands of people? Lakhs of people? Well, that is the case. So he is creating a class of interpreters in the country. These people will interpret. They will not talk directly to anybody. These people will only be a means of conveying the ideas of one group to another, and they will be just in the middle of it. That is what I meant by middle class. So they are middlemen. You buy from somebody who is producing it, you sell for somebody who is going to consume it, and what is your job then? Your job is to just change hands. Just you say, do one thing with respect to one person, and the other thing to the other person, and you being just an instrument. So he is creating a class of interpreters in the country, and those interpreters will be lakhs and millions. I am sure that the motive is sinister. The motive is such, that it will have long-term implications. what is planned in the middle of the 19th century is going to affect the history of India in the 20th and 21st century and later, because these millions of people who are interpreters, these people finally will be neither productive in one sense nor consumer in the other sense. They will be in the middle of it. So, they will be doing both the things. They will be buying and selling, they will be part of it at another level. But their social job will be to interpret. So, this is what the Britishers aimed at through this minute called Macaulay's minute, and Britishers wanted that there should be a group of people in India who should be reduced to the level of interpreters. And this is what this document is saying. So, form a class of interpreters. What kind of a class and what kind of interpretation? Viewers, think of this. You interpret somebody's interests. How do you interpret? Faithfully? You can do so faithfully. Faithfully in the sense that the even the intention of the person who speaks can be made clear to the hearer. Will you do that? You can't do that because you have been appointed an interpreter by a force, by an economic force. So, you will be all the time keeping in mind the interests of the employer. Therefore, you will interpret wrongly. You will interpret to please your master, and you will interpret to attack the interests of the other person who is the hearing party, and vice versa. Maybe the person who is resisting and who is disagreeing with the person sitting in front of him, that interpretation will be presented in a manner that the hearer, in this case the upper class, will get only the sense of confidence that they are right. So, interpretation also can have lots of dubious things hidden, concealed in the various layers of its activity. So, who will be the interpreters and what will they interpret and what will be the nature of their character? What will be their character, for instance? First, and I am quoting, English in taste, in opinion. What is the English taste? Well, one should keep in mind. In India, Indians will have to lose their taste. Will have to use their preferences. Will have to use their liking and dislike. But they will be behaving like the Western people in India. So, they will be in English in taste. So, whatever English people choose for life as good, that is what Indians also will start doing. India will lose independence in the choice of their activity. So, they will choose those activities, those things also in life which the English want. So, if Indian people are fond of eating one kind of thing like parathas and all, then they will leave that, and then they will be using the habits of people who are outside. Maybe they will use fork and spoon, maybe they will use knife, maybe they'll start having sandwiches. There is no harm in eating sandwiches also, I am not saying that, but then one thing will be one thing will be taken as superior and the other thing will be taken as inferior, because the manners of the people who are rich and who are powerful and who are privileged, those manners will become an ideal thing for the person who is asked to take those manners as more likable, as more acceptable. So, the people in India, they will be Indians, but they will be English in taste. In opinion also English, what does it mean? Once again, two things, please keep in mind this. One is that your opinion has to be your actual genuine opinion, but that is not what he is saying. The opinion will match the opinion of, will be supporting the opinion of the Britishers. So, these people will find out, the Indians, the group of Indians that he has in mind, they will find out as to what will please the foreigner, what will please the Englishman, and that will be the opinion. So, if the foreigner says that Indians have dirty habits, then the person who is in India, who is an Indian, who is brown in color, this person will straight away say that those people are superior, they are better, and we are worse. So, our opinion also gets affected and influenced by the interpretation. So, he says that there should be people among Indians who will support us and who talk like us and who accept our opinion as their opinion. So, in English in taste, English in opinion, English in morals. This is a strange thing to consider. What is the English moral and what is the Indian moral? This is a philosophical question. There is a question that goes into the manners of people. This also goes into the character of traditions that India has had, as well as traditions that England has had in the last hundreds of years. So, their morals will be our morals, and we will shed our morals. We will give up our morals, whatever morals are. Once again, morals cannot be matched, should not be matched. Morals are deeply stuck in the manner of living of a particular society. But then those morals will have to be discarded by Indians, because now there are superior morals. There is a set of superior morals coming from the West, so we will emulate those morals. Once again, friends, I am not saying that the English morals are good or bad. What I am saying is that the emphasis is not on good or bad. The emphasis is on the English morals and the Indian morals, and by definition the Indian morals are supposed to be inferior. So he has said three things. Indians will be English in taste, English in opinion, English in morals, and finally the most surprising, the most amusing thing is English in intellect. What is intellect? Is rational faculty. Rational faculty doesn't bother about geographical boundaries. It doesn't bother about social specificities. There is nothing like English intellect and Indian intellect. Intellect is the agency to think, the faculty in the mind which thinks, which analyzes, which looks at things scientifically, which matches facts with the opinion that we hold about them. So this intellect also can be English intellect. In a way, he is telling us in the 19th century that you don't have intellect, so you will have intellect. Secondly, that intellect has to be our intellect, our methodology. We will tell you what to think about and what to think. So in a very clever way, he is letting opinion enter the area of intellect. Now intellect generally considers opinion also as good or bad, as acceptable or unacceptable. But after some time, we will be habituated to connect and equate intellect with opinion. So if you have an intellect only when you have an English opinion, and an English opinion is that which the English people like. Now see, the entire web that is being created in this case is that they want a group of people in India to behave like them, to think like them, and to also think that they are superior and Indians are inferior. This is the idea of intellect in this case. So he is that way. I don't want to use such terms, but then somebody who is a Vibhishan in our midst, somebody who is only physically with us but mentally is with somebody else. This class he wants to create. He is recommending the creation of this class in India at that point of time. So English in taste, English in opinion, English in morals, and in intellect. And there is a kind of dichotomy here. I noted it down for explaining further, between taste and opinion on one side and morals and intellect on the other. Morals are not intellect, taste is not opinion. So why is he bringing in two words? Because in the case of taste, you generally are unaware of your taste and its limitations. You have a taste, you have developed it over years, and then you accept it as your taste. But here you start thinking about your taste in a manner that was not done earlier. So therefore, they are making us conscious about the inferiority of our taste. And this is a very subtle way of creating a sense of inferiority in the Indians, among the Indians. And well, in the latter half of the 19th century and in the 20th century, there were a great number of people who went to schools and colleges, who spoke English, and in the process of doing so, they started actually feeling that they were superior. And when they were treated as superior by the Britishers here, by the British bureaucracy, by schools and colleges, by the community of readers, if you wrote in English and if you were published in English, then your social status was higher, and if you wrote in Hindi or in Bangla or in Tamil, then your social position was inferior. This kind of a thing started happening in India after such a planning that this person had in his mind. So this dichotomy is there, that you have an opinion and you have a taste, and the two are and the two can go against each other. But in this case, the opinion will be English and taste also will be English. Therefore, you can combine the two and make Indians actually Englishmen. And morals and intellect. Now, morals and intellect, once again, moral is something that helps me understand the nature of my adversary or nature of my friend, nature of my associate, whether he is socially useful or not, whether socially he is harmful or what. So this is the idea of morality, so that I am concerned. But then intellect is common to all of us. So if you think, if you analyze, if you also correct yourself, if I correct myself, then of course I have that intellect. Morality cannot be subjected to this kind of an examination, unless one has a very definite and a very evolved intellect. That's a philosophical area. Let's not go into that. But then he is using his words very cleverly in order to say things which will finally help them rule over India, not just in the sense of physical resources, but also in the sense of intellectual resources, emotional resources. They will ask us to remain or be angry with something that they want us to attack, and they will define the area where we should expend our anger and we should attack things or people. So it's a very subtle thing, and unless one understands it properly, one cannot go into the motives that the document minute is being guided by, is being driven by in this case. Let's now go into a few assumptions of the of this document, and we will come to a close with that. The assumption behind the minute, because there are certain assumptions there. What are they? First assumption: India can be entirely manipulated. It's an assumption. It's hidden there. That's why they want to manipulate us. If they knew that we could not be manipulated, and if they knew that we were equal to them, if they knew, if they assumed that we were as respectable as they were respectable in their case, then of course they would behave differently. But their assumption is that we are inferior. They never said so. Maybe some people would have said in their private circles, but so far as the open statement is concerned, in the English Parliament, in the English press, among the Indian authors, they would not dare say all those things. But then the assumption was that India was an inferior country, and that it could be entirely manipulated because it was weak. A weak person can be manipulated, and India is weak. In that, India has some kind of a inherent strength that they didn't assume, because if they had assumed that, then they would have treated us in a different manner. So India is entirely manipulatable. This is the assumption. So come, have a good, happy hunting ground in India, reap the benefits here, invest your money, raise factories later, call people, convince them by your superior intellect, and go back smiling. This is the assumption of this, and how far this assumption is right or wrong should be today made clear with the help of analyses that we have. The second assumption, the first assumption is very amusing, that India can be manipulated. I can also raise the question: if India could be manipulated the way Macaulay thought, or his supporters thought, or the British government thought, how come that after a few decades there was a resistance movement in India? Which means they were wrong. You see, let a Gandhi come, let a Jawaharlal Nehru come, let Subhash Chandra Bose come after, let's say, 4 or 5 decades, and then where does the interest of the Englishman go? Macaulay cannot think of this. The British regime cannot think of this. They are in fact astounded. They are surprised, that India can really raise its head, in some kind of a revolt against the policies of the British. So that assumption is also proved wrong. I am not saying that the assumption was well founded. They might have gained some immediate benefits from this, but when it comes to the long term, then you realize that no country, in fact, no group, in fact, of constituting human beings can be manipulated forever. And if they think so, then they are definitely not people of intellect, because our intellect tells us that human beings are equally equipped all over the globe. So you see, this thing brings out their smallness in the context of understanding India. So this is the assumption, and the assumption tells us clearly that so far as their intellect was concerned, it was not definitely superior. If it were so, then they would have understood that human beings behave in a manner which goes against the idea of dictation, idea of telling us to do what we may or may not want to do. The second assumption: a middle class will be unidimensional. So the middle class that they will create will support them. This is an assumption. It can happen. There are examples, where Indians went against themselves, went against India, and they supported the British. But the whole of the middle class, That didn't happen. That can never happen. After all, middle class Indians also, Indians, they are middle class by profession, but they are Indians by birth. They are Indians by habits and life. And some of them would have the intellect to see, that the two things finally can combine, and then India attains and enjoys what is called, multidimensionality. That they can agree with the Britishers, they can also disagree with them. And this can happen also in the case of middle class. There are in fact a large number of parties and forces in India in the early part of the 20th century. They through English, they developed a sense of hatred for the British, the sense of rejection for the British, and the same class whom Macaulay thought would be supporting them. Many of them, a large number of them, left their side and went over to the other side. The third assumption, the second assumption is that middle class is unidimensional, one-dimensional. It will not happen the other way. This is like saying, that I have a knife which will cut only my enemy. It can also cut me if it's wrongly used. So that they didn't understand. The middle class was supporting them, but the middle class can also oppose them. The third and the last dimension, the last assumption that I think of is that life obeys planning. That whatever planning you have, life will obey it. It's wrong and right. To a certain extent, life will obey planning, but after some time, life will resist also. If the planning is wrong, if the planning is supposed to be harmful, then life will oppose it, and life will not allow complete freedom to any individual, any activist group, individual or the collective. So, which means that the British mind, crystallized in the form of Macaulay's thought, cannot understand that it's very difficult to control life with reason. Reason will help life to a large extent, but reason will not be the sole master. Human beings have a sense of dignity, sense of honor, they have values of their own, which are not available to the dry intellect, that we think of it is. So therefore, these assumptions, show that there is a kind of vacuity, there is a kind of shallowness, superficiality in the argument, because of which Macaulay's minute may serve a purpose in the middle of the 19th century, but soon it will become outdated, it will become obsolete. And people like us later on would start think about its weaknesses, and then we know that a regime can make policies which keep the population of a whole country under check, but then those people beyond a point will not accept the surveillance, the servility that the outside regime is imposing on them, and then of course they would invent, and they would have their own ways to assert themselves. So this is what I say finally, viewers, that Macaulay does this in his own time quite bravely. This minute is a very long document, but then finally when he is laying down policies, laying down the plans, etc., then you realize that after a couple of decades or more, India will not be the same country that was in the time of Macaulay. This minute is presented in 1835. In 50 years, exactly 50 years later, a Congress party is formed. Exactly 50 years, 1885, the Congress party under a Britisher, and this party will finally be a vehicle. Congress is not a party actually. Congress means a combination. So it's a combination of Indian forces and Indian intellectuals and Indian politicians, and this party, even though it is working under the leadership of a Britisher in 1885, this will soon will be in India's hands, and India will become a free country after a few decades again. So this is what I'm saying. You can't control life for all time to come, and this document by Macaulay tells us this very clearly. And if we place this document in the 19th century context, then we realize that after reading it, after seeing its inefficacy, we draw a lesson, and then we do not treat life the way the British are treated in our case. So this is where I would like to stop, and thanks viewers for this, and thank you.
With this note, thank you sir, thank you so very much for giving us a very vivacious session once again. And dear friends, if you want to give your feedback for this particular lecture, then you can mail us at info.cec@nic.in. We would be meeting again very soon. Till then, take care, goodbye. Thank you sir, thank you so very much.
Thank you.